Good evening, class. Sadly, I have to come with you with a topic that is not so easy to talk about, but it'll grab your attention and it'll start a great conversation, maybe in your own family. I want to pose you with the question is it ever okay to hit a child? And a child is defined as someone that is between the ages of 0, birth, and 17 years of age. So is it ever okay to hit a child? Are you uncomfortable yet? A fractured skull from blunt force trauma to the head killed a 4-month-old girl. An autopsy had just revealed her father now faces a charge of first-degree murder. Both girls had injuries that include skull fractures, broken ribs, according to the sheriff's office. Piper had burns on the soles of her feet. I've been through some serious cases, the sheriff explained, a 30-year-old law enforcement veteran, but I've never seen an infant hurt this bad. It's almost conscious shocking. And I want you to pay attention to that word. He said conscious shocking. And that's what this is going to be about. This speech is going to be conscious shocking. It's going to make you think about some things that you might not have thought about before, or maybe even some things that you did not want to think about. There's a lot of myths that are addressed with corporal punishment and spanking and child abuse. So my number one goal is to educate you, to let you understand the background behind spanking and corporal punishment and child abuse and different and various subjects that kind of revolve around how it affects children throughout the life course. At the end of the day, you should be able to determine whether spanking or hitting a child is really necessary or important for the life course. One of the first myths I'd like to burst or talk about in this speech is that these are unique and very rare cases. Children are not being killed and beaten and abused every day. Although every case is not like this one, they're far from unique. There are 40 million children that are killed by the hands of parents and caregivers and caretakers every single year in the world. Spanking or corporal punishment, as you may have heard, is an effective way to discipline children. It works. It's worked forever. It's great. The Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child. So it's a great way to discipline children, right? I was hit as a child and I'm fine. My mom spanked me all the time. And I turned out great, didn't I? And what thoughts come to your mind when you think of spanking, whipping, beating, almost torture? And then one thing that, just moving from that, a lot of parents, especially me and myself growing up, I believe that corporal punishment or spanking, it was a hit and you learn discipline, and the lasting effect is that you learn discipline. You learn to respect your parents and your elders and those above you. But there are very different lasting effects that go along with corporal punishment. For instance, most infants and toddlers, which means under the age of 4, who are experiencing corporal punishment will end with fatal injuries or lifelong disabilities. That's children under 4. Most people start spanking their children around about 6 months. So we're talking about death. Ultimately, there are many more consequences for older children, which means 5 to 17. And that means cognitive impairment, which means they're not just naturally thinking strongly. They may have impaired moral judgment. And when I say impaired moral judgment, I want to say a numbness. A lot of children who become spanked about age 11, the spanking does not bother them anymore because they've become numb to violence and numb to pain and numb to that form of discipline because it is very numbing. So they lose their moral judgment. They learn to have more violent relationships. And when I say violent relationships, children who are spanked are more likely to go to school and fight other children. They're more likely to be more violent with their brothers and sisters. They're more likely to be more violent in their future relationships as a parent. They're most likely to spank their own children, which I'll talk about a little later, and they're more likely to spank their spouses. Abuse their spouses is a more correct word because that's always abuse. And then like I said, it is a lasting and longing effect. So if there's a lasting effect, some type of cycle is being created. Like many of you and many of people around the world, I was spanked as a child, and I do believe I turned out fine until I think about the type of memories that daunt me. And when I get compelled to spank my 1-year-old, well, it reminds me of being spanked as a child. It's a vicious cycle. It is a common belief that parents who abuse children are monsters. They come far and few between, and it's extremely rare in the United States that we have parents who abuse children. However, most parents do practice a form of culturally accepted form of corporal punishment, which has escalated in several cases every single day to child abuse. Firstly, let's find out what types of parents abuse children or neglect them, because emotional and neglect are definitely types of child abuse and corporal punishment. Many parents, and this may apply to you, it may apply to someone you know, may apply to that lady in the grocery store that you might see tomorrow, have been maltreated themselves as children. They have mental health problems such as depression or bipolar disorder. They have violent marriages or hard work jobs. They may be substance abusers or young mothers or fathers. They may have lower levels of education or income. But those are not the only parents who abuse. It's not the stereotypical single parent home moms are the only ones who are abusing their children. We have a second group of children, a second group of parents that we often look at who abuse children. And that group is more aggressive parenters. Usually in parenting, you have two mediums. You have aggressive parenting, and then you have they almost call it laissez-faire parenting. Then you have the happy medium, which is where all parents should be trying to go holistic. But then we have parents who have unrealistic parenting deficits, unrealistic goals for their children to reach. And they tend to have harsh, aggressive parenting that is almost emotionally unattached. And those people usually frequent corporal punishment on their children would usually escalate to some form of child abuse. Cognitively stimulating child abuse is very pertinent. So if you think about a cycle of parents who were once abused, who are abusing children, who will abuse children, it lets us know that we must do something. And I want you to just take a moment and just look at the pictures on the PowerPoint, which are right here. And I just want you to listen to the story. And I want you to think about, why don't I want to hear this story? Because many times I see those stories, no different from the dogs being abused on the TV or a woman being abused herself. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it on my television. I don't want to hear about it. But why don't we want to hear these stories? A 2-year-old girl found dead in the Lansing home suffered from blunt force injuries from child abuse, and her death had been ruled a homicide, officials said today. Jariah Patterson was found unresponsive in her home in the 1700 block of Wildwood Avenue around 2 p.m. Jariah was just 2 years old. An autopsy was conducted by the Cook County Medical Examiner Office today. That was filed on March 19, 2014, yesterday. But court documents, this is the next story. But court documents say Frankie Williams stated he punched the victim hard. His description of hard was hard enough to kill a child. Frankie Williams admitted to repeatedly punching Anaya at their apartment last week while his wife was at work. Investigators said Stephanie Williams didn't get help for her daughter for 6 hours. Police said she told her husband she needed to call the doctor, but he said no. The people will just get involved, according to court documents. And those are just brief excerpts from just 2 stories. So in this 9 minutes, you've heard 3 stories, 3 children, all dead. And I'm not going to say any cute word for it because it's dead. Those children are not with us anymore. But there's something you can do. And you've already done something because the conversation is started. You're not going to leave this speech and not be evoked in emotion to start a conversation. And I ask you, what could you do to stop it? You could save a life. And to do that, I believe that every single person, if you see someone in the grocery store and they're about to spank their child, start a conversation with them. Ask them about the apples that you see on the shelf. And you may have saved that child one more time. There are hotlines that will be provided at the end of the PowerPoint that show you who you can contact if you know child abuse is going on. Because every child deserves someone to speak for them. Let's protect our most precious gifts. Because they're human beings, not human becomings. Bye.